Antitragus piercings. Pros, cons, advantages, disadvantages. Going to give you 5 of each, along with what you should know beforehand, getting the piercing, healing the piercing, living with the piercing, jewelry, and what happens if you don't want it anymore and you decide you want to take it out. Coming up next on Pros and Cons by a Piercer, Season 2, Episode number 13. So, yeah, if you want to know all that, you should probably stick around. For those who are new to the channel, first off, welcome to the channel, but you may not know who I am. My name is DaVo. I'm a professional body piercer and have been since 1994. I own and operate the Axiom Body Piercing Studio, located here in Des Moines, Iowa, inside Skin Kitchen Tattoo. So, what I'm going to tell you comes from my 26-plus years being in the industry of the piercing of the body. We're going to talk about an antitragus piercing, or antitragus piercings, depending on what you're going for. These are pierced through the antitragus, which is actually the term for that part of your anatomy. They're either done straight through or at a downward slight angle, depending on how that part of your anatomy is shaped. Now, this is pretty much a modern piercing. I don't think any ancient cultures ever did this. I'm sure somebody tried to do it at some point because we tend to try to pierce everything. But for the most part, it's probably from the early 90s. It might have been done before that, but there's nobody that really claims that they developed it like other piercings. So let's get into the pros, the cons, now let's get into the pros, the advantages, the things that we like about this piercing, the things that make us want to get this piercing done. Starting with number 1, it's not a very common piercing. This piercing, it goes through, it's one of those piercings I don't do for a while, and then suddenly I do 2 or 3, and then I don't do any for a while, and then I do 2 or 3. It's not a very common piercing. It's not a piercing that you're going to see every day. It is a very unique piercing because it usually has to be done to fit that person's anatomy. So, if you want something special, this might be the piercing that you want to get. Number 2, fits well into the anatomy. This is a piercing that is basically needs to be done to match the anatomy. Some people have kind of a shelf there, so like having that curved barbell there looks really cool. Some people, it's completely straight up and down. You can do it and maybe put a ring in there. You can do multiple ones. It just looks like it fits there, like it's almost an extension of your lobe piercings. Number 3, for the most part, this is a quick heal. Usually healing out in roughly about 12 to 16 weeks. It's not as long of a heal as other piercings. It's not as prone to problems as other piercings. But, you know, it has its disadvantages, and we'll get to that later. But it does heal, and it has a long history of healing. Well-established piercing. This is not experimental. This is not something that we just came up with. This is not out there, edgy type stuff. This piercing is known to heal. You can heal it. It's not going to be something it's going to reject almost immediately. And the last one, number 5, there's a large amount of variety of different types of jewelry that you can put in this. The most standard types of jewelry that we initially pierce with is standard barbells, curved barbells, or labret studs. They have various different colors, ends, styles, materials, etc. to choose from. You can play with that quite a bit and have something that not only is like a piercing not everybody has, but have a piece of jewelry that not everybody has either. So it'll be special to you. And make sure to give us a thumbs up if you like this video. We like it when you like it. If you haven't subscribed, hit the subscription thing, and then ring the notification bell thing. That'll notify you every time we post something new to the channel. Now it's time to move on to the cons, the disadvantages, the things we don't like, the things that aren't so great, the things that may keep you from getting this piercing. Starting with number 1, the jewelry needs to be oversized. Because of swelling, because of inflammation, because of problems with this piercing, the jewelry is usually initially pierced with something that is too long for the piercing. This could be a disadvantage or a con because it's going to have more contact. It's going to be more likely to catch on things. It's going to be more likely to get snagged on things. So it's going to mean that you're going to have to make additional jewelry purchases after the piercing is healed. Number 2, and this is probably one of the most consistently said things on every pro and con video that I do about ear piercings, it must be isolated. Yes, it does not play well with others. You need to keep this piercing separate. Don't sleep on it. Don't put things against it. Don't wear things against it. Keep your hair away from it. Keep your fingers away from it. Keep your dog away from it. Keep everything away from this piercing, or you will have issues. And that brings to number 3, and that is anatomy. Not everybody has the anatomy for this particular piercing. There has to be enough there to, basically it's too small. There needs to be enough there to support the jewelry and support the piercing. Some people do not have enough room there to do that. So it is very important that, they evaluate your anatomy before they start going ahead and doing this piercing. Grumpiness, number 4. So, grumpiness is any piercing. Basically, it's a big thing with cartilage piercings. During the healing process, they get knocked or pushed on or moved slightly on a Tuesday, and the next day they're sore, red, agitated, and angry. Grumpy, basically. They're Oscar the Grouchin'. They don't want to have anything to do with anybody. Now, this piercing is prone to that, like most cartilage piercings, and because of its location, it's more prone to get hit on things. So that is something you need to consider. Number 5, and this one is you may never be able to wear earbuds, stethoscopes, or anything that goes into your ear canal. Because of the location, and depending on the size of your ear and the amount of space there is, having pressure against that piercing even after it heals may cause issues. So take that into account. If you work somewhere where that's not going to be possible, or you're not going to be able to not wear something in the area for 3 months, it may not be the piercing for you. Now we're at the end of the cons. Let's talk a little bit about merchandise. Yes, we have lots of it. We have t-shirts, we have swag, we have fanny packs, we have phone cases, we have all that fun stuff. So once you've got done watching the video, I would suggest going over there and checking out our merch store, maybe purchasing something to make your life a little bit more colorful and enjoyable. And, help us out. Links are in the description. There's also one of those merch bars down there, too, that show a few things. Kind of give you an idea. Now, with the cons out of the way, we're going to move on to what you should probably consider before getting it done, or what you should know. First thing is you should pick out a piercer that is experienced, knowledgeable, has done this piercing in the past, because like I said, it isn't a very common piercing. So you may have to look around a little bit to find somebody that's actually done one. They should offer a consultation that will cover the risks that are involved with this piercing, what it's going to take to heal it, what they're going to suggest for aftercare, and talk to you about your anatomy and evaluate it to see whether or not it is suitable for this particular piercing. They should also talk to you about jewelry options, and they should suggest for the initial piercing standard barbell, labret stud, or curved barbell. They should not suggest a ring or any circular style jewelry. That may work later on, and you may want to mention that to them so that they place it so that you can do that. But during the initial healing period, you're not going to want a ring in there. So do not get pierced with a ring. One thing I always tell people to ask their piercer is, do they provide aftercare product, instructions, etc.? As far as the aftercare product, most people, it's sterile saline spray, comes in a can, most commonly Nelmed. If they don't stock it, or give it to you as part of the piercing thing, ask them where you can purchase it. It's a good idea to buy that stuff in advance so you're not running around your resident city looking for some product that might not be that easy to find. It's best to just kind of have that stuff just sitting around waiting for you. Now, the next thing I would ask them is if they supply aftercare instructions. They should be both written, and it should also be verbally, or they should offer you something like a video. As I mentioned before, you do want to avoid wearing earbuds, headphones, any helmets, safety gear, stethoscopes, anything that's going to have contact with the area. If you do something for a living or you're involved in some type of sport that's going to require you to do those things, you need to do this piercing when you can take a break from using those products or items for at least 3 months. The other thing is, no matter what, you're not going to be able to sleep on this piercing during the healing process and possibly even afterwards. All right, let's talk about the piercing experience itself. Usually what will happen is you'll come in, they'll do the consultation, they'll evaluate your anatomy. Then they will give you some jewelry selection ideas or their suggestions. Then you might fill out a waiver. Next, they're going to set up all their equipment, disinfect the area with a surgical scrub of some type, and then they're going to go to market. Now, when they're marking it, if you're planning on doing additional piercings in that direct area, you want to mention that at the time of the marking. The reason for this is it's easy to make room for those additional piercings now than it is to come back in 4 to 5 months or a year or two and go, oh, I don't know if there's enough room. Because if you want that additional piercing, it may require you abandoning the piercing and having it redone. So always, if you have future plans, talk to your piercer about it at the time of marking. I will usually mark additional piercings in the area just so that you can get an idea of how they're all going to fit together. This piercing is usually done freehand using a needle receiving tube or a cork. In some cases, because the tissue can roll back and forth, using a set of forceps is possible. It really depends on your anatomy because that's going to dictate the angle and the placement, and it varies from person to person. So it's kind of an open subject, but most of the time it's done with a needle receiving tube in most cases. Now, the jewelry insertion may take a little bit longer than the actual piercing. There's a lot of maneuvering around to get that sharp needle out of the area to get the jewelry in. They may use guide pins or a taper pin to insert the jewelry afterwards. Be patient. That might take a little bit longer. Also, this may cause additional bleeding in the area. That's not unusual. That's pretty much normal. Now, there might be some slight bleeding off and on for a few minutes after the piercing is done. Don't be alarmed by that. It's also not uncommon to have throbbing, aching immediately afterwards. That will continue for a few minutes and then usually subsides. Then it's just going to be tender to the touch, meaning anytime it has contact, it's going to hurt. So don't have contact. Isolate. Now let's talk about the healing process. Average healing time on this one, as I mentioned earlier, is anywhere from 12 to 16 weeks. Not months, weeks. I'm going to suggest that you clean it twice daily using a sterile saline spray. Also practice common sense, good old-fashioned cross-contamination prevention. And that's going to include washing your hands before you handle it, no oral contact, no exchanging of bodily fluids on or around the piercing, keeping your environment clean, clothing, bedding, towels, anything that may come in contact with it, not submerging the piercing in bodies of water you can't control the quality of, which is everything but your own clean bathtub, so no swimming. Avoid contact with unclean objects, things like telephones, headphones, earbuds, stethoscopes, anything that comes in contact with the area either needs to be disinfected on a regular basis or contact needs to be avoided completely. Make sure that your hair dries before it comes in contact with the piercing. And if you can, avoid contact with hair. This is a big one, and I've mentioned it before, and I'm going to continue to mention it. Avoid contact with the piercing and trauma. Do not sleep on the piercing. Make sure you're sleeping on the other side of your back, or you figure out a way to elevate the piercing off the bed. Constant contact, I don't care how good it feels, and it doesn't hurt, will move the jewelry, causing issues, and it will prolong your healing period in most cases. Piercings like to be isolated. Healing tissue does not like trauma, so avoid contact. Now, lastly, it's not going to be uncommon to see redness, discolorization, heat, tenderness of touch, inflammation, swelling, maybe even slight bleeding off and on for anywhere from 3 to 5 days. This is your body recovering from the trauma caused by the piercing. This is normal. It doesn't mean you have an infection or other problem. Also, sometimes you'll see a little bit more of the discharge hardening and collecting on the jewelry. Okay, let's talk about jewelry. It's always best to leave the jewelry that you're pierced with in until it's completely healed. If it is too long, if it's constantly getting caught on things, or it seems like it's shifting and moving a lot, and it's probably leading to other issues, you may want to downsize sooner than the healing completion. Now, if you do that, I really, really, really suggest you let your piercer do it. They have the experience to do it, they have the tools to do it, and they're going to cause less trauma than you are. And I know some people charge for it, but it's worth it when it comes down to the peace of mind that comes with letting a professional do something that can be very difficult. Now, when you downsize the shoulder barbell, it should be comfortably tight, meaning I always use the jean analogy. If you're watching my videos, you've heard this before. You want it like jeans. You want it tight enough that it looks like it fits, but not so tight that you can't breathe. There should always be a little bit of play in any jewelry because your body is organic and it tends to expand and contract from time to time. So don't ever put anything in there that's super tight. The jewelry should be left in at all times, only taken out to replace. I know a lot of people I like to take it out and clean it or take it out for the night when I sleep. There is no reason to do this. The reason why body piercing jewelry is designed the way that it is so that it can be worn comfortably in the body for a long period of time. So leave it in. Just leave it in. Don't mess with it. There's no reason to. Avoid jewelry that has sharp edges, points, things dangling off of it, or can easily get caught and snagged on things, especially if you have longer hair that comes down to that area. Even after the piercing is healed, having this stuff in there is just asking for something terrible to happen. When picking out jewelry, especially threaded jewelry, make sure that it's internally threaded, meaning that the ball has threading that threads into the post like a screw, not a nut, or the threadless style where the push pin goes into it. Having that threading on there, not only is it a sign of a cheaper piece of jewelry, usually not good or well manufactured, but also it can cause damage as that rough threading goes through that piercing. Even a healed piercing can get damaged by that. Now, if you decide you want to wear a ring in this piercing, I would suggest waiting until the piercing is completely seasoned. And when I say seasoned, I mean the healing time, generally ×2. If it takes 4 months for it to heal, you should wait a year, meaning 4 months and then 8 more. And the reason being is that you are generally changing the shape of the piercing. As the piercing seasons, it produces more tissue and thickens the wall around that jewelry. It also loosens up a little bit. So it's going to be a little bit more tolerant of there being a slight change. The other thing is the ring should not be super tight. It should be somewhat large to allow it to be as flat as possible inside the piercing. Now, if you switch to a ring and there's suddenly problems, switch back to the old jewelry. You got too tight of a ring or it's too early. Give it more time. Now let's talk about living with the piercing. Of course, first off and foremost, you need to leave the jewelry in at all times. Already talked about this. You know why. Even with a healed piercing, you want to avoid pressure or trauma against the piercing. Try to elevate it off the bed. Do not sleep on it. You may never be able to sleep on this particular piercing. Understand that. If you're buying earbuds, stethoscopes, anything that might go in your ear canal, test them before you purchase. See if they're going to have contact or not have contact. It's very important because this piercing is part of you now, and having that pressure on it or trauma of constantly taking them in and out can cause issues. It really comes down to how big your ear is and how big that device is. Same thing comes to helmets or anything that's against it. As I always say, with ear piercings, do the palm of the hand test. Put your palm against that. If you can feel that area, then chances are anything that comes in contact with the area is going to cause trauma. Let's talk about abandoning the piercing. Now, piercings, when they close in the center and then fill outward. So often a piercing will appear to be open, but in actuality it is closed. Over time, your body fills up those holes and it will generate back to somewhat normal tissue and the scarring will reduce. What you'll generally be left with is 2 holes, indentation scars, usually the thickness, the same thickness as the jewelry, maybe slightly larger. Not really that noticeable in most cases with this, as long as the piercing healed healthy or there was no problems with it. Now, one thing that sometimes happens is you will see this cream cheese stuff, if you squeeze it, will come out of it, and it's gross, and it smells weird. That's not an infection. That's not a problem. That's completely normal, and it should be fine. What it is sebums. It's what your body produces to make it waterproof, moisturize, and also to lubricate your hair follicles. And it tends to do a lot of this on scar tissue. Now, it's not going to do anything. It's completely natural and normal. There's nothing you need to do about it. It's kind of gross, but it'll fade over time. That's it. That's all I have to say about tragus piercings today. If you feel like I brought up something or you have additional questions or questions about something else, please leave a comment. I usually answer them when I have time. Be patient. I'm about 2 weeks behind right now. Till next time, here's hoping all your piercings heal with ease and without a single issue. And if you're in the Des Moines, Iowa area, I hope to see you for your body piercing needs in the future. Have a good day, everybody. Take care. Thank you for watching the video, and we'll see you in the next one.